Colonization never ended in the white supremacist system. And as we see today, the colonization is in the mind. Now, those who have been enslaved and those who have been colonized, we're still dealing with the remnants of that through the colonization of the mind. Pick up my book, 7 Steps to Decolonize the Mind, and we will help deprogram you from the colonization that was put upon you by generations and generations of white supremacy. You can pick it up today on Amazon.com. So you still doing the tea ceremonies?
I am. I'm doing tea ceremonies in Atlanta.
Oh, in Atlanta, okay. Are you traveling the continent doing that?
Not yet, but I have a really beautiful space in Atlanta. It's called the Sanctuary. So the Zulu tea ceremony is based out of there. And then we also have a company called Meta Moto. Okay. So Moto means to be, it's the act of being a human being. So of course Meta means like beyond. So when you do your tea ceremonies, when you drink your teas, when you do your massage, your therapy and all of those things, you're tapping into and bettering yourself as being a better person for yourself in terms of your wellness. But then when you're good personally, you're good for the nation and for the world. And so then you're going deeper into something that is beyond being human. And that's when you kind of tap into your ethereal self or your spirit body. And that's when you fully tap into being kind of in unison with your true being, or like tapping into what you truly came to do here, which is be a healer and inspiration, and to first and foremost be healthy. So yeah, Zen Zulu tea ceremony is brought to you by Metamoto.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. When I hear the word meta, I keep thinking it's metaverse.
I know. I mean, yeah.
They branded it very well.
It existed before.
Mark Zuckerberg came up with that.
Well, he didn't really come up with it.
Okay. Well, he stole it from somebody.
I mean.
But what is the metaverse? You know what I mean? Like the metaverse could be whatever network you tap into and tune into. So it's bigger than just one thing. It's many of them.
I think it is. It's multi-dimensional. It's kind of like looking into, like we've existed for so long in terms of like thinking of ourselves as universal beings, but the metaverse, I suppose, because I haven't even like read one paragraph of what he's trying to do, but I assume that it's like going into interdimensional spaces, and so meta is like going beyond the verse. We've been operating on the universe, but we know that there are multiverses, and then going into whether it's the universe or the multiverse, you're going beyond that, which is whatever he's creating as a platform. But the idea of itself has existed beyond time.
Well, let me ask you a question. You be in America, you see all the issues and problems. Spiritually speaking, we talking about spiritually. I mean, just answer honestly. Where do you see America within the next 3 to 5 years? What you see right now, spiritually in the country?
I think that what is happening in America, as well as globally, is divine order. And I think that like with the yin and yang, like you have light and dark. And I feel like right now is a very pivotal time for Black America or Moorish America, because it's a time to like fully actualize one's power there and their truth. So I tend to like look at it as more of a optimistic opportunity in terms of the shift that's happening, as opposed to a pessimistic. Like I understand sociopolitically we're changing, but I think that this is like a time that's probably very prophetic, like the last shall be first and the first shall be last. And I feel like the original people of the planet that have a huge presence in America are coming into their own. They're coming into their power, their spiritual prowess, and I feel like it's a very exciting time. And I feel like the people in America, you know, a friend of mine, he always used to say, there's a great scholar, historian, his name is Osir, the Duke of Tears. He said to me years ago that Africa is for tradition and culture, which I fully agree with, and America is for information. So I feel like if we were to build bridges and bring the cultures and traditions of Africa and bring the knowledge and information from America, we would be a superpower, because we are obviously trendsetters, and also like when you look at America, I think that America represents the empire. It really does, you know. Like I I was raised in New York State, and I saw how like New York as a state or as a city was really like the empire for not only America but for the world. And I feel like African Americans, or America in general, is the empire. So, and African Americans represent that head of the empire, because African Americans are the global trendsetters and also have the loudest microphone when it comes to having a global black voice. So you find that if something is happening in Kenya or Sudan or South Africa, you'll find more black people in America making noise and crying for their people and brothers and sisters on the continent than people on the continent making noise and crying for freedom and liberation for people in America. So I feel like just having that platform that is quite prophetic, you know, the children of the wilderness, I think that this is a very pivotal time, and it's a very important time. I mean, I see so many great shifts with people taking back, being very active in getting their land back. When you look at the people of the Hamptons, or people going back to the land, like there are massive groups of people who are buying land collectively. There are people who are changing and shifting their focus on health. And I feel like those influences, that activity is influencing the global black experience as well.
Yeah, well, you know, what I have said many times is, and maybe you can speak to this if you feel so, that you look at, I said when 2019 happened, which kind of commemorated, you know, we say 400 years in America, you know, being under bondage.
Yeah.
And it seems like ever since that moment, calamity started, you know, yes, for other people, but more so for the white man. And then he goes from a pandemic, now he's dealing with a war. And recently, the Minister Farrakhan said that the white man's world is about to end. He can't rule no more. So do you see his world coming down?
We're watching it crumble. We're watching it crumble right now because, first of all, we know that in the West, that is not their land. And I feel like there's something very interesting about South Africa specifically. Unlike any other African country, there's a very striking similarity between South Africa and the States, in that we seem to operate on a 400-year cycle, and that's very scary. And I said that to my aunt the other day, who's here in Soweto, and she was like, "What do you mean, Neo?" And I was like, you know, it's like, as South Africans, if we speak of anything that happened beyond like, even like a generous 500 years, it becomes like weird. Like, why are you talking about that? Even if when I was growing up, like even if we spoke of Kemet, it was almost like blasphemy. Like, those things happened up there in Africa and we had nothing to do with it. But like Kemet at that time was the empire of the world at that time. And you can still see relics of Kemet in every society in African culture. Like the Zulu woman wear isqolo, which is like exactly the same hat that Nefertiti wore. So you can see the relics of those empires. And I feel like in Black America, people aren't allowed to speak on anything that had existed in their storyline beyond 400 years. And even when people do, as Black people, we chastise people for speaking on that and still want to always revert the story back to slavery, right? So when somebody says, nah, like my people were actually here for like 1,000 years, like we like to say romantically, we're the first people on the earth, right? As Black people.
Yeah.
Okay, fine, we were, right? And we know there are indigenous Black people in Papua New Guinea, we know there are indigenous people in Malaysia, we know that there are indigenous Black people in China, in the Andaman Islands. I mean, the Grimaldi man was the Black man of Europe that was found in the ice, you know, a full humanoid person. But when it comes to the empire, because of its power and what it represents, if a Black person says, my family has been here for over 1,000 years, it is like blasphemy. It's the weirdest thing to me. It's like, how can we say we're the first on this planet? We see relics of ourselves being in every aspect of existing on every continent and in every culture and having presence in every culture of antiquity. Yet, in America, everybody has to collectively go back to a slavery story. And I feel like that's very disempowering, personally.
Well, as a Black American who have that definite lineage that comes from that, for us, we don't view it as disempowerment you have to understand, chattel slavery in America was one of the most brutal forms of slavery known to man. And for my ancestors to not be wiped out, like just eliminated, there's certain races of people that have been eliminated by white folks. Our ancestors survived all of that, almost 250 years. Then right after that, they had 10 years of Reconstruction. Black people did great, but then after the 10 years of Reconstruction, then here we go again with all the Jim Crow and the Ku Klux Klan. And my people have always been fighters, right? Your people have been fighters, right? So this is why, you talk to Black South Africans, they understand, because they fought hard, they died, everything to fight for their people. So with us, 1994 happened here.
Yes.
You guys had a turn, even though you still got issues of apartheid and race, but it was turned over to the black government. We haven't had our healing for that yet in that land, like the reparations. We haven't had our proper, just due with the land. Like Black Americans had thousands upon thousands of acres of land. You talk about land here, and imagine all these hundreds and hundreds of acres of land, thousands of land, just taken away from you. Just if you look at the story of Bruce's Beach, just go look that up. They had their land. They took it all the way from the family. Just recently got that land back. They're worth about $75 million.
What region is this in?
What?
What region?
In California.
Oh.
In Bruce's Beach.
I see.
So it's so many families that lost land. So for us, slavery, I don't look at it as it's disheartening. I look at it as, encouragement. I look at it as the tenacious fight of my ancestors. And I will never, never let that go. Just like I don't expect you to let go what your ancestors been through with apartheid. That'd be like somebody coming along and said, well, apartheid is a long time ago,
Yeah, no.
But for us, we still live it, just like you live in the remnants,
Yes.
we're still living the remnants of slavery. Do you know the police force in America was created out of the slave patrol?
Yes.
They morphed into the municipal police force. So slavery is still literally dealing with today because the police is part of slavery. And unfortunately, they have spread it all over the world. You don't supposed to be having a police force here. You're supposed to have a tribal council, but not a police force.
Yes, totally.
That comes out of slavery. So
Right.
it's every part
And
of the white
policy.
man's system has come out of slavery. It's still in existence. Mass incarceration.
Right.
That's not part of African culture.
Right.
That's the white man's culture.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So we still dealing with the remnants of slavery, whether you see it or not.
No, and I do respect that, Phil. I would never take that away from your lineage. Like, I would never want somebody to say, like, apartheid is over. Why are we still talking about it, right? But what I'm saying is that, like, culturally, it seems like we here are not really allowed, even amongst ourselves, to have any kind of genetic memory that goes beyond 400 years. So it's as if to say that our existence, we just kind of came into existence when the Portuguese came here.
I understand
And
what you're
so
saying.
when you talk about the people, the Califians, or the people
Yeah,
of Cali, they came from Buddhist Island. That is like, okay, we understand what we went through and how we were disenfranchised from our land, but we also have a glorious story of what happened before 500 years ago when any Viking or, European came here.
You're right. You're right. But it's twofold.
Yeah.
Okay, twofold. America doesn't educate nobody. America basically teach you to be dumb. Let's call it what it is. On top of that, your ancestors, what is your tribe? Zulu?
I'm Sutu.
Okay. You still have your history. You can go back thousands of years and show your history. When my ancestors came, like for instance, my ancestors came from, at least on my mom's side, from Guinea-Bissau, the Balanta tribe. When they came to Virginia, the language was taken away by beatings, XYZ, killings, whatever. When the new children were born, they didn't speak the language of the Balanta tribe. They didn't do the language. So they literally stripped away everything of who we were as Africans and told us, now you speak in English. Now your name is Toby. Now your name is Sarah. Now you worshiping a white Jesus, right?
Yeah.
And that identity, now we have fought against that identity. It still created our own identity in the midst of that. But prior to who we were back then, even though you're right, we have a long history, we started from scratch because everything was erased, right? So now what I do, I say, well, at least try to get to the motherland. Let's start getting that education and things like that. A lot of things I'm still learning to this day. But that's really where it comes from, because some Black Americans may say, well, you'll say that, say, see, well, some African immigrants, they say we should forget slavery and they get offended by it. But I think it's just an education thing between explaining why we say a certain thing and then why we are very staunch about it. And then that also fuels our fight. Because you remember you said we have the biggest voice, anything we touch. Well, where does that come from? We were always killing the slave masters and rebellions. We always fought back, and that's just in us to do. So, I'm proud of my history, just like you're proud of yours, right? So, if we known as the fighters, we known as the voice. Well, let's continue to be that. That's how I look at it. I'm always be proud.
Thank you so much. Yes. So, what similarities do you see between South Africa and Black America, or America
in 2021? Today.
No,
okay.
Today.
Well, black people don't own the land here and don't control all the resources like as they should. The white people do, correct?
Correct. So then we have to ask ourselves, is apartheid really over?
Is the apartheid really over? No, it's not.
Yeah.
In America, black people own about 0.05% of America. So we don't own America as we should, even though we built the place, right? Systemic racism is in the Constitution of America, is built in the DNA. I've had people here tell me literally systemic racism is built in here. It's just a little bit more subtle and nuanced versus in America it's a little bit more upfront to you. Now, y'all may not have a Sandra Bland or a Rekia Boyd or George Floyd happening as much as we do. But, you still have issues with the police. You still have, you talk about the people being corrupt. America's full of corruption. America's more corrupt. Just the West in general is more corrupt than anybody. They just hide it a little better.
They're very sophisticated.
Yeah, black people, look at home ownership in America. I was told today they only have really one major art gallery that's black owned in this country. One major one. I say major, like tip top. We're not talking about small. We're talking about tip top. Yeah, why is that? When this country is more than 90% black? It doesn't make sense. So we have, like you said, y'all still having to come off of apartheid and having to change that mindset of no, white people can't own everything. Because in my opinion, y'all in a better position than we are to get them out of the way. We're not the majority. We're fighting behind enemy lines. We are, 14 to 15% of the U.S. population.
Yeah.
So, but we still have a shared story of racism, white supremacy. So that's why I can easily talk with y'all versus, let's say, if I talk with a Nigerian or a person from Ghana, they don't have the same,
They don't have the same issues.
Because they're not dealing with white people like that.
They're not. And even when they do come it's through corporation, and they have to actually be a lot more cordial than they are here. When we talk about even issues of xenophobia here, issues of xenophobia are more on the ground here. It's more sort of like black on black hate. You understand? Because the immediate person you're looking at is a fellow African, and people feel very offended that some Africans are on the come up, or not even on the come up. It's like
Thank you.
There are a lot of people that are offended because they feel like Africans who are immigrants are taking their jobs and things like that because it's more in their face and more apparent, right? Whereas we have a high influx of Chinese immigrants and Russian immigrants and Bosnian immigrants. And we're not just talking about immigrants, we're talking about mafias, okay? So these are some of the things that we don't...
Well, really let me tell you about that. I'm glad you brought that up. I understand, coming from America, why the people here are just kind of upset a little bit, because y'all fought and died for freedom. Other people come in here and benefit while y'all still are trying to recover from apartheid. In America, we fought and died for a whole lot of freedom too. And we have immigrants that are coming to America and just start disrespecting us.
Totally.
You know, they'll come in, they'll get a home, or they get a business in a house in 3 to 5 years, and they'll say, why y'all black Americans lazy? Lazy? You know what I'm saying? It's just like the disrespect. I'm not saying all immigrants do that, but immigrants in general have been practicing that in America. So a lot of Black Americans are now saying we cool on the immigration because too many have came in being disrespectful. And what the government do, at least in America, they give them money that they don't give Black Americans.
This is true. Let me ask you, because you live in Texas, and obviously there's a high population of, I would say, Nigerians in Texas, right?
Yeah, definitely in Houston.
Do you find that you come across people that have that attitude that you've encountered?
Was calling us lazy?
Yes.
Not to my face. Not to my
so
face.
much.
They wouldn't say nothing like that.
Yeah.
And nothing I do could be bothered by anybody. But that's just a kind of sentiment with not just Nigerians, but we talking about like you mentioned many immigrants. In general, they look at Black people as lazy.
I think yes.
And have immigrants say that about Black South Africans, that they're lazy?
Yes. And I just want to say that people, first of all, it's such a multi-layered conversation because people never leave their country to just sit around in another country.
No.
Do you know what I mean? So when a person leaves their country, they're going to leave and kind of like work really hard. And then it makes them feel like they can judge the people that are indigenous or
the locals.
Yeah, the locals of that area to say that they're being lazy or what have you. But honestly, people that are in their hometown are going to be much more comfortable. Naturally, they're at home. Mm-hmm. So I would agree with you in terms of what you're saying about the fight and how that affects the perception of like immigration and things like that. Because I would say that I grew up as a Pan-African, right? Mm-hmm. But I think it was also easy to grow up as a Pan-African because I grew up with a father that was in exile. And so when you're like already a freedom fighter, a Black nationalist, a Pan-African, and you're in an area where you're socializing with all kinds of different black people from all different African countries, as well as African Americans, and understanding that struggle as a South African, understanding that struggle, the struggle of Black Americans, I would say that I'm very grateful for my upbringing, right? And so because I come from a very Pan-African mindset, and because I've spent a significant amount of time in my life in the States, I would say that when I hear people, even I wouldn't say a lot of people in my family, but I would say there are some people in my family, and they are actually quite affluent. So it's not like they're on the ground just like mumbling. These are people that kind of seem sometimes to be kind of xenophobic, you know? And I have to ask them, like, yo, uncle, you sound real xenophobic right now, but I don't hear you saying anything about Russians or whatever. Why are you complaining about other Africans? And he's very adamant that when people come here, they have been very disrespectful. And I think the issue with xenophobia in South Africa is that South Africans for a long time were quite incubated due to apartheid, couldn't really leave the country, at least not in a leisure way of leaving and coming back, right? So when people fought for freedom, and I would say actually like around 91, this is when South Africa started to get a little more lenient, because this is when Mandela was released, and so South Africa started to like get a little more relaxed. And then by the time 94 came, it was almost like the floodgates, the borders just opened up. And you remember that most African countries have been independent since the 60s. So now you have people who are well educated, some not, but most coming through, and their opportunities are different. And that was very sort of infuriating for a lot of South Africans, because we never collectively had an opportunity to just rise to the occasion. Now we're dealing with other ethnicities or other nationalities who do come down here and look down upon South Africans. So yes, I've heard conversations where people here in South Africa have been very derogatory towards South Africans. I'm also like, my mom is from Botswana, so I also consider myself half Botswana, and I've lived in Botswana, and people do it there too. Zambians and Zimbabweans working in Botswana will collectively sit around and have conversations about how Botswana are lazy. Oh, and then in Southern Africa, we may also, like, in some ways, I feel like even sexuality is viewed differently. Like, people are more own their sexuality here, and so oftentimes people come from northern regions of Africa, and they like to say derogatory things about how women own their sexuality, you know? Whereas, I mean, everybody in the whole world is having sex, but like now it's like it's so stigmatized because they may be doing things in secrecy, whereas South Africans just kind of own it, you know? So in the South, you know, in the dirty South, it's like
Well, like I said, for me,
a little more liberal.
South Africa is very westernized to me. That's my impression. It's westernized. So westernization comes with what you're talking about versus other African countries, like you said. And like a place like Ethiopia, very conservative. Oh, very conservative. You know, you LGBT, you're going to jail. Nigeria, you're going to jail. That ain't fine. You know, I mean, but how I look at that, that's their rules, that's their country. I can't say nothing. You know, that's not my business. But, you know, but the lazy thing, I always say that why is it, if somebody's quote unquote lazy, what is it to you? That means more opportunity for you because they're not in your way, right? But I just use that, I believe, my opinion, just as a way to a lot of it's jealousy and a lot of it's self-hate too. Because like you said, you won't talk about them Chinese and Russians and all these other people coming in here, but you focusing on the black people, right? And I, look, disrespect, I'm with you. Check the disrespect. We doing that in America. Look, any immigrant come in disrespect black Americans, we checking them. But like I said, you need to focus on the other groups too that's coming in there too. Don't just focus on them. So, but I believe most people want to do good. You know, and I also heard the situation, like we say in America, if you're going to immigrate, do it the right way. That's the only thing I've been hearing people say. Come the right way, follow the laws of South Africa, follow the laws of America, and you're okay. But you coming in through the back door, or if you're doing illegal things. So I've been hearing about people selling drugs and all that. Of course you don't want drugs in your neighborhood. I've seen what they done in the black America, the crack epidemic, right? So you don't want that. So fight to keep drugs out of your country.
Totally.
You know. But one question I want to ask you about wrapping up, because you know the dynamic. I want you to explain it about being colored in South Africa. Yeah, I got to go there. Okay. So I know that was started during the apartheid. I know they was used, as I explained, as a buffer class. They was used to say, oh, well, we're going to treat them better. They better than you black people, but they not us white people. But they was preferred, right? So now you look at them today. How is that relationship? Because correct me if I'm wrong, I was told that they were given the opportunity to classify themselves as black and a lot of them chose not to. Is that true?
I don't know if they were given the opportunity, but I would say personally, growing up from outside of South Africa, I used to think that the term was very derogatory, and I'd just be like, what's the big deal? They're just black, right? And I remember one time I came as a teenager and spent a significant amount of time, and I was having a conversation with my cousin, and I was like, they're just black. I mean, what's the big deal? Why don't you stop calling them colored? It's derogatory. They said, okay, Neo, you know what, we're gonna take you to a colored township for the weekend, and then you tell us if they're black, like African. I mean, even though they're African, like continentally, you tell us if you tell us after observing them if they're the same. And that's when I realized, like, wow, they really do have their own culture and their own way of being. And for a long time, many of them didn't want to associate themselves with being African or black. But I think that when they're more so coming from a Afrikaner perspective, like when their home language is Afrikaans, I feel like they're more inclined to be less associated with black people, you know, unless they're like coming more from like maybe a Khoisan background. So that's a whole nother sector of the colored race. But I think like in places like Gauteng, a lot of colored people can still say like, oh no, my granny, she's like staying there in Soweto or whatever, and they may be more likely to speak vernacular or indigenous languages. But seemingly they do have their own culture, and they are now very proud of being colored, and a lot of them are very proud of being colored. But what's an interesting dynamic in South Africa is that for a long time, you know, people didn't want their daughters, let's say, dealing with African men, right? Because they're also trying to keep a certain phenotype as well, to maintain a certain phenotype, which is something that you find anytime there are people of a mixed race. They're trying to maintain that. I mean, even Ethiopians are very specific about that, right? So what is happening now, like before, like they were a buffer race, right? So maybe they had a little bit more on their plate than Africans did, right? But then when you find now, like in the new South Africa, there's a lot of black people that are on the come up, right? So now you find that not only, when we're looking at more so popular culture, people, a lot of black youth or black young people came into wealth in a very sexy way. And now you're looking at pop culture, like in terms of what's trending, like in terms of the music that's hot, or even just general hip hop culture and things like that, has made a lot of colored people become more keen on being down with black people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. And so those same families that may have been like, you will not have Sipo as a boyfriend or what have you, are now like, okay, what are you bringing to the table? It's okay. And you'll find even some white families too that were affluent and stuff. They're seeing that like maybe in some places the majority of like affluent, available, amazing white men are declining, and now those same families might be like, yeah, we don't mind having a black in-law because they see the value in it, you know, economically.
Okay, because every time I bring that comment up with most black South Africans, they all have the same look you had. You're like, I'm like, boy, that's a sensitive subject. Every time I mention color, you know, and it's interesting. Like I said, I want to, when I go to Cape Town, I'll make sure to talk to a few of them. I want to hear their dynamic. Because one time I saw on YouTube, they had two, you know, a man and a woman that was colored, and they did an interview, and they literally sounded like white people talking. What I mean by that is like, well, oh, well, you know, I don't like Julius Malema because he's a racist. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Aren't you black too? You fight for you too, right? You know, oh, well, why don't we just do it the right way? And like, I mean, the same talking points that white Americans would have, they were literally saying it. I'm like, oh my God, they sounded like white racists. Oh.
Yeah, if Cape Townians could have South Africa another way, the majority of them, they would.
Okay,
Definitely
I'm
vote
gonna
another
find
way.
that out. And like I said, if that's what it is, I'm gonna report on it and say, man, y'all, you know. But I'm looking for the good people too.
But they're everywhere. And South Africans in general, we're amazing people. And we have to remember that it was ethnic engineering.
Right.
Like we collectively, as South Africans and Americans, have been socially engineered. But when it comes to the colors thing, that is an ethnic engineering. Yeah. You know?
Almost like an ethnic cleansing type of.
It's an ethnic engineering.
They're trying to wash out the bloodline.
And it becomes intergenerational. So it becomes so intergenerational whereby people at this rate don't know like necessarily what their original makeup is.
Right.
And many people have learned to become very comfortable with it and like have become very defiant in saying, no, this is our culture. Like we are Africans and we are colored at the same time, kind of thing. So,
ooh, that's some interesting dynamics, that's for sure.
I see that your food is getting cold, but I do want to ask you before we break, what do you think about America and and where its trajectory in the next 3 years?
America's already lost its place in the world. Because I remember at one point in time, America could say something, and everybody jumped. They wouldn't buck America. They wouldn't even say nothing against America. Clearly, that's gone now. Clearly, that's gone. You know, people could say it's Trump. They could say it's Biden. I think it's collectively. But I believe the Western world is steadily going down every day.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's going to be better for us as a people because it's, you know, we was ruling the world for thousands of years.
Exactly.
Life has a way of being a whole circle. So what I believe we got to do as a people is learn to live outside of white people, because white people are not going to be able to take care of us in the future. They only be able to take care of themselves. We want to learn how to grow our own food and like I said, holistic medicine, things like that. You know what you're talking about, and having teas and spices and, you know, our own religion, because we're going to be up a creek at one point in time depending on white people. That's just like my opinion, but I see it happening fast. I said this before, I believe by 2030, you won't know the world anymore. That's how quick it's going to happen.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, and this situation is going on in Russia and Ukraine. I believe that's going to affect them. It's already affecting them, you know.
Yes, I actually think that with, you were saying something about 2019 and the brinks of 2019 and like what America is it losing its power? You said something about what the honorable minister said about the decline of America as a nation, or the decline of the white man. And so I think what this whole Russia thing represents is a shift in power, but it's a shift in an Asiatic power. Because remember that Russia is actually Asia, and China and Russia's military are like some of the most powerful militaries. And now the Indian Prime Minister has joined hands, or joined forces with them. So we have like, what, 2-3 BRIC countries in that. I think Ukraine is just a sacrifice, or to show Europe like what's about to happen. And I feel like that's an Asian shift happening. Like the West is pretty much a wrap now. Western Europe and America.
Well, this is what I said. It's not our fight, it's not our problem. We need to mind our black business. Just like, you're hearing them going to different African countries, asking them in to fight and all that. No. If you fight right here in South Africa, you got 1,000 things to fight for. Let the people fight. In America, we got 1,000 things to fight for. We don't need to, I don't cry over them. I cry over what's happening to us. You know what I'm saying? Now, I mean, I hate to see bad things happen,
Totally,
but I'm watching, like, people like, was that little girl, Ma'Khia Bryant, the cop in America, he got off with no charges. Things like that constantly keep happening to black people. That's what I'm gonna fight about. I can't fight for something that had nothing to do with us.
Totally.
You know what I'm saying?
I mean, I feel like we're being pressurized also to take a stance, but I do want to say that like Russia never came here and hurt, like Russia as a nation, they helped a lot of our fathers and mothers fight, against Apartheid. So like I feel like, we Russians never went to America wholesale and messed with black people, you know what I mean? So I just kind of think that we shouldn't really be pressurized in taking a stance. And I also want to say, I think it would be an interesting world if, as black people collectively, we just sort of slowly started dissipating the white man from our psyche. Because the more he lives in our psyche, the more we give life to him. Like, I pretty much live every day being very conscious of their existence, but they don't really hold space.
You could do that, in my opinion, when you come here. If you live there, but even if you come here, look at what's happening in Russia. They know how to, because we're in their system. We have to start getting out of their system and doing our own systems here in the continent, right? But I mean, as long as you live in America, you're gonna be in their system. As long as you live in Europe, you're gonna be in their system. Period. But here, you get to get back to the old way. The old way was like barter systems. Let's say, okay, you grow figs, I got some cows. Okay, well, you give me so many figs, I give you so much milk from my cow, without no money. We got to get back to that system, because they even used to do that in my neighborhood back in the day with the old people. Everything just fiat currency or whatever. That's why they can control you, and they hate when we try to break away from them. Oh, they hate that. So I just think that we need to get back to that, and just learn to live life without them, because the day gonna come when you're not gonna have them.
But every city in America had its Rosewood, right? They had their Black Wall Street. They had their Auburn Ave. And I don't feel like white people lived in their consciousness so much. That is why they were able to thrive. But the more they became physically present in the consciousness of black people is when they were able to sort of come through and sort of topple those economic systems. Well,
white supremacy dominates every country. If you don't believe me, you'll see. They dominate every country right now. But their world's coming to an end, and we need to be prepared to do things on our own. So I want you to let people know about your tea business. Tell them how to get to it. Give them the information, because they need to know.
Got you. Give thanks. Well, my name is Neo Mirage, and I own a tea company called the Zulu Tea Ceremony. We are based in Atlanta, Georgia, at the Sanctuary in the historical Black district of the West End in Atlanta, right down the street from Tyler Perry's studio, right around the corner from Spelman University, Morehouse University, Clark University. So come check us out when you're in Atlanta, and if you're not, you can hit me up on Instagram at the Zulu Tea Ceremony.
All right. Once again, thank you very much. It's been some years. What year was that? 2019,
right before
18.
It was 2019.
2019? No. It was before that. It was 20. I think 2018. No, I think it's 2017, 2018. It's been that long. The 2019, no.
I wasn't here. I wasn't there 2017. I was in Botswana.
So it's 2018?
No, I was fresh off the boat then. It was like November 2019.
You came to Atlanta?
No, when we met.
Okay. I guess I slept a lot since then. 2019. Okay. All right. Well, like I said, good looking out in Atlanta. Like I said, Atlanta's a cool city.
Yeah.
I like it. And y'all make sure to go to her Instagram page. Tea sessions are great. This is the South African version of Erykah Badu. So check it out.
No. Give thanks.